What happens when the very walls meant to uphold justice become a living nightmare? Across the globe, women's prisons exist, where survival feels like a cruel daily challenge. Overcrowded cells, relentless violence, and inhumane conditions push inmates to their limits, testing their strength and spirit. These prisons aren't just correctional facilities. They are battlegrounds of despair, where holding on to humanity feels impossible. In this video, we'll uncover the haunting realities of the 10 worst women's prisons in the world. Brace yourself for a journey into the dark corridors of cruelty, resilience, and the shocking truths hidden behind bars. Number 10. Pattare Prison, Estonia. Nestled along the coastline of Tallinn, Estonia, Pattare Prison stands as a chilling reminder of humanity's darker chapters. Originally built in the 19th century as a sea fortress to protect the city from naval attacks, its imposing stone walls and barred windows were designed to intimidate. By the 1920s, the fortress transitioned into a prison, gaining infamy as one of the most harrowing places of incarceration, particularly for female inmates. Over the years, Pattare evolved into more than just a prison. It became a symbol of suffering, despair, and survival. Life inside Pattare was defined by its brutal conditions, especially during the Soviet era, when many of its inmates were political prisoners. The cold, ever-present along the Baltic coast penetrated the prison's thick stone walls and seeped into the very bones of its inhabitants. A former inmate described how frost would form on the walls during winter, leaving women with no choice but to huddle together for warmth. With only straw mattresses and thin blankets, there was little reprieve from the unrelenting chill, and illnesses such as hypothermia and respiratory infections ran rampant. The overcrowding only intensified the misery. Originally built to accommodate around 1,200 people, Pattare frequently housed over 4,200 inmates during its peak. Women were crammed into cramped quarters, sometimes with up to 40 individuals in a space meant for a fraction of that number. The lack of basic hygiene and ventilation turned these overcrowded cells into breeding grounds for disease and despair. Beyond its physical hardships, Pattare carries a reputation for being haunted. Visitors often report eerie experiences, from whispers echoing through the hallways to cold drafts sweeping through empty rooms. The spirits of those who suffered and died within its walls are said to linger, adding an almost palpable weight of sorrow to the air. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, Pattare Prison's oppressive atmosphere is undeniable. Its walls, steeped in untold stories of hardship and endurance, seem to emanate an unshakable sense of dread. Today, Pattare stands as a grim testament to the suffering endured by countless women within its confines, serving as both a historical site and a haunting reminder of the price of injustice. Number 9. Julia Tutwiler Prison, Alabama, USA. Behind the towering fences of Julia Tutwiler Prison in Wetumpka, Alabama, lies a harrowing world of suffering, neglect, and abuse. Opened in 1942 and named after prison reform advocate Julia Tutwiler, the institution stands in stark contrast to the ideals of its namesake. Initially intended to improve conditions for incarcerated individuals, Tutwiler has instead earned a notorious reputation as one of the worst female prisons in the United States, where inmates face overcrowding, inadequate healthcare, and rampant abuse. Designed to house 550 inmates, Tutwiler has repeatedly exceeded its capacity, often holding close to 1,000 women. This chronic overcrowding has led to squalid living conditions, with inmates packed into cramped cells that lack basic hygiene and privacy. Overcrowding alone creates a challenging environment, but the issues at Tutwiler go much deeper. In 2013, the prison was ranked among the top 10 worst prisons in the United States by Mother Jones magazine, due in large part to reports of sexual abuse and inadequate medical care. The extent of abuse was uncovered by the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, which conducted interviews with more than 50 inmates. Their findings revealed a horrifying pattern of guard-on-inmate sexual violence. Women reported cases of rape, coercion, and even pregnancies resulting from these assaults. Such violations were not isolated incidents, but part of a systemic failure to protect inmates. The United States Department of Justice later confirmed that Alabama was in violation of the Eighth Amendment, failing to safeguard prisoners from abuse. Retaliation against women who dared to report their abuse was another tragic aspect of life at Tutwiler. Whistleblowers faced isolation, intimidation, and the confiscation of personal items, such as photos and letters from family members. One woman described the emotional toll of losing her children's photographs, likening it to losing a piece of her soul. For pregnant inmates, the situation was even grimmer. Without facilities to accommodate infants, mothers were forced to give birth only to be separated from their newborns immediately afterward, compounding their trauma. Healthcare at Tutwiler has also been a source of grave concern. The prison's outdated infrastructure and lack of medical resources have led to life-threatening situations. One inmate nearly died from a health condition that was grossly mismanaged until emergency treatment was arranged outside the prison. Mental health services are similarly lacking, leaving inmates to grapple with despair and psychological trauma in an environment devoid of support. Efforts to reform Tutwiler have been slow and largely ineffective. In 2016, Alabama Governor Robert Bentley announced plans to close the prison as part of a broader initiative to address the state's prison crisis. However, as of 2020, Tutwiler remains operational, its legacy of suffering unbroken. For many, the promise of reform feels like an empty gesture, overshadowed by the grim reality within the prison walls. The stories of Tutwiler's inmates reveal the profound human cost of incarceration in such conditions. Many women arrive at the prison already scarred by past trauma, only to have their spirits crushed further by the horrors they endure. One former inmate recounted how she entered the prison, clinging to hope, but left feeling utterly hollow, her sense of self eroded by years of mistreatment. The stories emerging from Tutwiler serve as a stark reminder of the urgent need for meaningful prison reform. They are not just accounts of injustice, but rallying cries for a system that values human dignity and safeguards basic rights, even for those behind bars. Number 8. Tadmore Prison, Syria. Situated in the barren expanse of the Syrian desert near Palmyra, Tadmore Prison is often referred to as Hell on Earth. Renowned for its brutal treatment of inmates, particularly political prisoners, Tadmore has become a symbol of tyranny and despair. Initially constructed as a military base under French rule, it was later repurposed as a prison, gaining infamy during the 1980s under the regime of Hafez al-Assad. Tadmore's reputation as a place of relentless suffering has made its name synonymous with cruelty and repression. Life at Tadmore is marked by the complete absence of basic human rights. Prisoners endure psychological torment, physical abuse, and the constant threat of violence. The guards, who often proclaimed, "We are God, your life and death are under our control," operated with unchecked authority. This chilling phrase encapsulates the atmosphere of the prison, where survival itself is an act of defiance. One of the most infamous events in Tadmore's history occurred on June 27, 1980, following a failed assassination attempt on President Assad. In retaliation, approximately 600 to 1,000 prisoners were massacred in a single day. This atrocity was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader culture of state-sanctioned violence that defined everyday life at Tadmore. Executions, often carried out arbitrarily, turned the prison courtyard into a scene of horror, while torture sessions left inmates with permanent scars, both physical and psychological. Torture at Tadmore was both routine and unimaginably cruel. Inmates were subjected to beatings with sticks and cables, electric shocks, and degrading acts designed to strip them of their humanity. One former prisoner recounted how they were forced to swallow dead animals as part of their torment. For female inmates, the horrors were compounded by sexual violence and the added humiliation of being coerced into false confessions. The isolation at Tadmore further deepened the inmates' despair. Family visits were prohibited, and there was no access to books, news, or any connection to the outside world. Prisoners were left to languish in their cells, often in solitary confinement or paired with one other inmate in conditions that defied human decency. A former detainee described the chilling reality of hearing a knock on the cell door, knowing it often signified another prisoner's death. Despite the oppressive silence enforced by the regime, stories of Tadmore have emerged through memoirs and testimonies, shedding light on the atrocities committed within its walls. These accounts, often shared online to bypass state censorship, serve as powerful indictments of a regime that thrived on fear. They also stand as a testament to the resilience of those who survived, refusing to let their stories be erased. Tadmore Prison remains a stark symbol of the Syrian regime's brutality. Its legacy is one of unimaginable suffering, but also of courage and defiance in the face of tyranny. For those who endured its horrors, survival is not just a personal victory. It is an act of resistance against a system that sought to silence them. The stories of Tadmore's inmates remind the world of the urgent need to uphold human rights and to hold accountable those who perpetuate such inhumanity. Number 7. Bangkok Central Prison, Thailand's Bangkok Hilton. Despite its deceptively glamorous nickname, Bangkok Central Prison, often referred to as the Bangkok Hilton, is one of the world's most notorious correctional facilities. Located just outside Bangkok, it was constructed between 1927 and 1931 under the vision of King Rama V. Originally intended to house Thailand's most severe offenders, including death row inmates and those serving life sentences, Bangkok has since become infamous for its brutal conditions. Iron shackles, a grim welcome. From the moment prisoners step inside Bangkok, they are stripped of dignity. New arrivals are greeted not with the minimal comforts expected in modern prisons, but with heavy iron shackles locked around their ankles. For the first 3 months, these chains serve as a grim reminder of their lost freedom. Death row inmates face an even harsher reality, as their leg irons are permanently welded on, an unyielding physical and psychological burden. These shackles are not merely tools of restraint. They symbolize the dehumanizing environment of the prison. They mark the beginning of an existence where survival becomes an unrelenting challenge. The dire conditions of Bangkok. The prison is overcrowded, housing approximately 6,000 inmates in facilities designed for far fewer. Among them are numerous foreign nationals, many convicted under Thailand's stringent drug laws. For these inmates, life at Bangkok is a constant battle against despair. Food is scarce, and what little is provided is of appalling quality. A single bowl of rice and vegetables constitutes a meal, if one is lucky. Wealthier inmates can navigate the prison's notorious chit system, using money to buy better food and small luxuries. Those without financial means, however, are left to barter with their fellow prisoners, turning mealtime into a high-stakes negotiation. Abuse and brutality. Reports of physical violence and psychological abuse are rampant. Guards have been known to punish inmates for minor infractions, such as not folding their sheets correctly or making accidental eye contact. The punishments are harsh, ranging from severe beatings to extended periods in solitary confinement. Human rights organizations have repeatedly condemned the conditions at Bangkok, describing them as violations of international standards. Despite occasional reforms, such as the 2013 abolition of shackles for most prisoners, the overall environment remains oppressive. Number 06. Antananarivo Prison, a stark reality in Madagascar. In Madagascar, the capital's Antananarivo Prison presents a similarly harrowing picture of life behind bars. Known for its extreme overcrowding and squalid conditions, it is one of the world's most infamous women's prisons. Severe overcrowding. Designed to house 800 inmates, Antananarivo often holds over 4,000 detainees. Many of these prisoners are pre-trial detainees, comprising roughly 60% of the population. This means that a significant portion of the inmates are held without conviction, often for extended periods. The story of Desmona, a 33-year-old woman held on charges of corruption of minors, exemplifies the injustices of this system. Arrested in March on suspicion of a same-gender relationship with her 19-year-old partner, Mona spent 10 months in pre-trial detention, despite her case calling for immediate release. Her experience underscores the arbitrary and prolonged nature of detention in Madagascar. Inadequate food and hygiene. Inmates at Antananarivo receive just one meal a day, typically boiled cassava. Malnutrition is widespread, with nearly 40% of women inmates suffering from chronic undernourishment. The lack of proper nutrition weakens immune systems, and exacerbates the spread of diseases. Hygiene conditions are similarly abysmal. Inmates sleep so tightly packed that they often rest their feet on each other's heads. This overcrowding, combined with poor sanitation, creates a breeding ground for infectious diseases. During health crises, like the COVID-19 pandemic, the risks are amplified, putting already vulnerable prisoners in even graver danger. Lack of medical care. Medical treatment is scarce and often inadequate. For female inmates, access to basic healthcare services is limited, making it nearly impossible to address illnesses that arise from the dire living conditions. In Thailand, the 2013 decision to abolish shackles for most inmates at Bangkok marked a small but significant victory for human rights advocates. However, this reform did not extend to high-profile inmates, leading critics to question the sincerity of these efforts. Bangkok's notoriety has also brought it into the public eye, with documentaries and articles highlighting its grim realities. While this attention has spurred discussions on prison reform, substantial change remains elusive. In Madagascar, President Andry Rajoelina's 2019 visit to Antananarivo prison shed light on its inhumane conditions. His administration proposed measures to reduce overcrowding and improve living standards, including increasing the prison budget for food and hygiene. International organizations, such as Amnesty International, have also advocated for reforms. Their efforts emphasize reducing pretrial detention and ensuring that detention is used only as a last resort. Number 5. Alah Prison, Egypt. Behind the iron bars of Alah Prison in Kanata El Kairea, just outside Cairo, lies a grim world that echoes with despair. Known as Egypt's largest women's prison, it is a place where stories of hardship and forgotten lives are buried beneath layers of neglect. Originally established in the 1990s, the facility was designed to house approximately 500 inmates. However, today, it holds over 1,000 women, subjecting them to overcrowded cells and deplorable living conditions. Overcrowding and sanitation challenges. The cells at Alah Prison are not just cramped, but almost suffocating, with inadequate ventilation turning them into claustrophobic nightmares. Women are crammed together in spaces that offer little room for movement, often sharing basic facilities such as washrooms that are inaccessible most of the time. Without proper toilets, inmates rely on buckets for their needs, buckets shared among groups of 100 women. The result is an unbearable stench that permeates the entire facility, exacerbating the already dire living conditions. Adding to the misery is the lack of adequate sanitary facilities, particularly for menstruating women. Sanitary products are scarce, forcing inmates to improvise with scraps of cloth or tissues. This lack of basic hygiene is not only humiliating, but also fosters the spread of infections and diseases. Isolation and mental health struggles. The emotional toll of life at Alah is as severe as the physical hardships. Inmates are allowed family visits only twice a month, each lasting a mere 10 to 15 minutes. For many women, especially mothers, this limited contact amplifies feelings of isolation and despair. The absence of rehabilitation or educational programs means that inmates have little to no support in navigating their incarceration, leading to a significant rise in mental health issues. Health and nutrition. Woes. Human rights organizations have extensively documented the appalling health conditions at Alah Prison. Inmates suffer from chronic malnutrition due to inadequate food quality and quantity. The limited meals provided are devoid of nutritional value, often leaving prisoners weak and susceptible to illness. Medical care is virtually non-existent, with a lack of resources and delayed treatment further endangering inmates' lives. Number 4. Carak Prison, Iran, a desert of despair. Located southeast of Tehran, Carak Prison stands as a harsh testament to the endurance of the human spirit. Originally an industrial livestock facility, it was repurposed into Iran's only all-women's prison, a place that holds over 1,700 inmates in a facility designed for 700. This severe overcrowding, coupled with extreme desert heat and scarce resources, creates a living hell for those confined within its walls. Overcrowding and unrelenting heat. Personal space in carak is non-existent, with inmates packed into cramped quarters where boundaries blur and vanish. The oppressive desert heat seeps into every corner, making even the simplest act of breathing feel like a challenge. Basic necessities such as drinking water are a gamble. Some days it's salty, muddy, or unavailable altogether. Those who can afford it buy bottled water at inflated prices, while others are forced to endure dehydration. Nutrition and healthcare challenges. Food shortages are a constant struggle. Meals are insufficient, with portions meant for 80 people, often distributed among 120. Meat is a rarity, appearing only during inspections from the prison's oversight authorities. Malnutrition is rampant, particularly among pregnant women and mothers housed in the mother and child ward. The lack of nutritious food further weakens inmates, leaving them vulnerable to disease. The prison's healthcare system is equally dire. Medical care is scarce, and the few available resources are poorly managed. Inmates requiring IV drips or burn medication are often left untreated. The clinic operates under appalling conditions, with the same beds used for various procedures without proper sanitation. Hygiene and sanitation. Woes. Hygiene facilities are almost non-existent. Showers are a rare luxury, with long queues and cold water making the experience far from restorative. The lack of proper sanitation exacerbates the spread of diseases, turning carak into a breeding ground for infections. A glimpse into life in carak. The struggles of daily life in carak are compounded by the psychological toll of living in such harsh conditions. Many inmates are mothers separated from their children, grappling with guilt and despair. Efforts to address these issues have been minimal, with authorities showing little inclination to improve the situation. Carak Prison remains a stark reminder of the dehumanizing effects of neglect and systemic failure. The resilience of its inmates in the face of such adversity is a testament to their strength, but it also underscores the urgent need for reform. Number 3. Indiana Women's Prison. Established in 1873, Indiana Women's Prison holds the distinction of being the first facility in the U.S. created solely for women. Before its establishment, women were incarcerated alongside men in harsh and often unsafe conditions. Reformers like Rhoda Coffin and Sarah Smith fought for a dedicated facility, emphasizing rehabilitation over punishment. Their efforts led to the creation of Indiana Women's Prison, which has housed both ordinary inmates and individuals with extraordinary stories. A history of notable inmates. The prison's first inmate, Sally Hubbard, arrived under grim circumstances. She was convicted of multiple murders. Hubbard's dramatic entrance set the tone for a facility that has seen its fair share of infamous cases. Among the most significant is Paula Cooper, a 15-year-old girl sentenced to death for her role in a murder. Her case drew global attention, sparking debates about juvenile justice and leading to intervention from Pope John Paul II. The outrage surrounding her sentencing prompted Indiana to raise the minimum age for execution from 10 to 16 years. Cooper's case also highlighted systemic issues within the prison. Reports revealed sexual misconduct involving staff, including guards and a therapist. These revelations led to reforms, such as laws prohibiting sexual relationships between inmates and prison employees. Another well-known inmate, Sarah Jo Pender, became infamous for her escape from Rockville Correctional Facility. Her story raised critical questions about the adequacy of mental health care in the prison system and the vulnerabilities within correctional facilities. The prison's evolution. Initially located near downtown Indianapolis, Indiana Women's Prison later moved to its current location on Girls' School Road. Its early missions centered on rehabilitation, offering inmates opportunities to learn practical skills like sewing and laundry. These efforts aimed to equip women with tools to rebuild their lives upon release. However, more recent years have seen the prison embroiled in controversy. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the facility faced accusations of inhumane conditions. Reports surfaced of inmates confined for up to 20 hours a day in cottages without air conditioning, running water, or toilets. While officials took measures to improve air circulation and ease restrictions, the extent of these reforms remains unclear. Number 02. Bolu Prison, Turkey. Nestled in Turkey's landscape, Bolu Prison houses a mix of female offenders, from those convicted of severe crimes to political dissenters. The prison has become a focal point for criticism due to overcrowding, poor living conditions, and allegations of abuse. Living in overcrowded quarters. Originally designed for a specific number of inmates, Bolu Prison often operates at 3 times its intended capacity. Imagine sharing a tiny cell with multiple women, where personal space is non-existent and privacy is a distant memory. Overcrowding has turned this prison into a place of relentless struggle. Essential services like adequate sanitation are often lacking, exacerbating the already dire conditions. For many women, the absence of these basic necessities amplifies their suffering. Reports from inmates describe a daily battle for access to shared facilities, making survival a challenge in itself. Alarming abuse and mental health challenges. Reports of abuse within Bolu Prison paint a grim picture. Physical violence from officers is a recurring theme, with prisoners recounting incidents of assault over minor infractions. Fear of retaliation discourages many from reporting these abuses, perpetuating a cycle of silence and suffering. Mental health care is another critical shortfall. Many women arrive at Bolu with the weight of prior traumas, only to find minimal support for their emotional and psychological needs. The lack of resources for mental health services leaves already vulnerable individuals at greater risk of worsening conditions, underscoring systemic failings in Turkey's correctional system. Number 1. Jang Women's Prison, China. In the remote northeast of China, Jang Women's Prison stands as a symbol of oppression and resilience. Nicknamed the Cemetery of Falun Gong Ladies, it is infamous for its harsh treatment of female inmates, particularly those who practice Falun Gong, a spiritual movement banned by the Chinese government. Life behind bars, relentless discipline and labor. The prison's oppressive atmosphere prioritizes control over rehabilitation. Inmates endure grueling conditions, including forced labor, sleep deprivation, and constant surveillance. Accounts from former prisoners, like Liu Jinping, reveal harrowing experiences. Liu described being forced to sit on a small stool for hours, leading to painful sores, and being denied restroom access. The story of Wang Chunyan offers another chilling example. Sentenced for her beliefs, Wang faced similar abuses, including isolation and mandatory propaganda sessions. Falun Gong practitioners are deliberately kept apart to prevent them from sharing information or organizing, creating an isolating and dehumanizing environment. Global advocacy and human rights concerns. Despite international criticism and calls for reform, Heilongjiang Women's Prison continues its practices with little accountability. Human rights organizations have repeatedly condemned the facility, highlighting its treatment of inmates as a broader reflection of China's stance on dissent and religious freedom. The stories of Liu and Wang, among others, shed light on the resilience of women who endure unimaginable hardships. However, they also underscore the urgent need for systemic change to address human rights abuses within China's penal system. The grim realities of women's prisons worldwide reveal the harsh conditions many endure behind bars. From overcrowding and abuse to insufficient healthcare and basic resources, these facilities often prioritize control over rehabilitation, leaving inmates to navigate unimaginable hardships. As we've seen in this video, the injustices faced by incarcerated women in places like Indiana, Bolu, and Heilongjiang women's prisons represent only a fraction of the global crisis. Each story is a call to action for reform, compassion, and justice. Let's continue raising awareness and advocating for humane treatment in prisons worldwide. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.